Good evening and thank you for joining us. You're watching Sunday Interview with me, your host, Grevazo Zulu. Concerns are rising as to whether Zambia is facing a critical food shortage following a farming season that was hit by drought. The harvest in areas such as southern and western provinces were severely affected by poor rainfall, leaving people in need of relief food. People in urban areas are equally struggling to meet the cost of escalating prices of billy meal that now range from 110 to 120 kwacha for a 25-kilogram bag. Is the country food secure? Agriculture Permanent Secretary Songowayo Zyambo is on the program this evening to discuss this and other issues in the agriculture sector. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Grevazo, for inviting us to this program.
Now, national food security is a major source of concern for the country at the moment, of course, in view of the poor rainfall that we had in the last farming season. Give me a general picture of where we are now.
Yeah, first, before I answer your question, I first of all, once again, want to thank you for inviting our ministry to come and discuss the food security situation in the country. Why we are happy is because I'm sure if you followed the media reports, there's been a lot of discussion regarding agriculture in Zambia. And such an interview gives us a very good opportunity to clear the air on a number of issues. Now, coming to the national food security situation in the country, I first of all want to remind you of what our Minister of Agriculture announced in the first week of May this year. You remember that he announced the crop forecast estimates, where he announced that as a country, because of the dry spells that we experience in the southern part of the country, we are expecting to produce just slightly over 2 million tons of maize. And then because of the carryover stock of 475,000 metric tons, the country had in stock about 2.4 million metric tons of maize. Now, if you look at our consumption levels as a country, 2.4 million tons is just about what we require as a country. So someone from that point of view can say the country is food secure. But as the ministry, which is in charge of national food security, we don't end there. We go further to do a lot of analysis. So what we have done is we've looked at a number of issues which may threaten our national food security situation. As we say, we just have just about what we require as a country. But the number one threat is, first of all, the illegal exports. As you know, right now, we have an export ban on both maize and mini meal. We are not allowing any exports to neighboring countries. But there is always this issue of illegal exports. Now, if illegal exports are not kept, that is posing a major threat on national food security. But I'm happy to report that we are working with security forces, and there is a committee within government which deals with how to tighten border controls. And there's a lot of work being done to ensure that we do not have these illegal exports. Although we have reports of these illegal exports happening on the Congo border, Malawi border, Namibia border, and we are hoping that it won't be to a level where it threatens our food security. The other threat that we have is, and this is what is explaining why you are seeing that maize prices are always escalating and going up, is because the private sector, they know that we've just produced just about enough. So everyone is rushing to ensure that they get their share for the next, up to the next harvest. And they are all over in the market competing on prices, offering high prices, so that at least they can buy what is theirs. Now, on the part of government, because of that situation, it is very important that even us as government, we secure as much maize as possible under government control. Because if we do not do that, we'll have a possible threat in the first half of 2020. So what we have done is we have ensured that the Food Reserve Agency enters the market early. Traditionally, Food Reserve Agency has entered the market in August. But what we did this year is we made Food Reserve Agency to enter the market in the first week of July. And I'm happy to inform you that we have addressed all the issues that surrounded the late payment to farmers last year. And farmers are now willingly supplying the Food Reserve Agency.
Are you paying them? I mean, assurance is a different story. Every year the FRA enters the market, we hear assurances that they'll pay the farmers immediately upon supplying the maize, but it's never the case.
Yes,
I know, for instance, that farmers that supplied in July last year were only being paid in April this year.
Yes, that's a thing
about
of
a year.
the past.
And
that is a
what
thing
is
of the
happening?
past.
What is on the ground?
What is happening is we have direct, strict instructions to FRA. As soon as the maize is supplied by the farmer, they have to pay that farmer immediately.
Do you have the money?
And
Does
it has
FRA
been
have the
happening. FRA has the money. They started in the first week of July. They started with 74 million kwacha. And they've been paying. If you go around in all the areas where FRA is operating, farmers are very happy and they're receiving money on cash.
Tell us how much they've bought so far. I mean, it's
so far,
over a month.
FRA has been on the market, yes, as you say, months. Exactly, they are on the market for about 3 weeks. And I'm happy to report that they've bought slightly over 30,000 metric tons of maize. And that's very good performance.
And against your target of 300,000?
Yes, it's against a target of 300,000, but you remember that the maize marketing has just started. It started in the first week of July.
And it may close at the end of August?
It may close at the end of August, towards the end of mid-September, somewhere there. And what we are doing is we are buying maize through the traditional way that FRA has always bought, but we have also partnered with the private sector through the Grain Traders Association of Zambia for them to also buy maize on behalf of government. Because what we are aiming as government, at the end of the marketing season, as government, we must have a hold, or in other words, control over at least between 500 and 600,000 metric tons of maize. That represents about 5 to 6 months supply. So if we have control...
You're facing a real risk here. Last year, your target was 500,000 metric tons, and FRA only managed about 174 metric tons. And this year, your target is 300,000. And as of now, 3 weeks into the market, you've only managed slightly above 30. Is that what you're saying now? So it looks most likely that even this year you'll be below half in terms of your target.
No, we are not going to be below, because what we have done is we are in partnership with the private sector. The private sector will supply about 200 minimum thousand. They will buy that on behalf of government. FRA will also buy over, let's say, 150,000 metric tons. When you combine the two, we are actually going to have controlled more than 300,000, which will be beyond the target that we have. And then if you look at what we have in the strategic reserves, which is just slightly over 200,000 metric tons, that's what gives you your 550 to 600,000 metric tons, which will be under the control of government. Those are the measures we put in place, and as I'm talking, those are measures which are currently happening. So it's not just a plan, it's something that is happening.
So the situation that you're facing now is probably coming out of the market price that FRA has put on the table. I know that private sector is buying at a price higher than FRA. And you were advised by the farmers, ZNBC in particular, that the price should be up between 120 and 130, 120 and 140, and you went for 110. Why?
Yes, I think that's a very good question, Grevazio, because it gives me an opportunity to clarify the types of prices that normally are offered in the agricultural sector. There's what we call on-farm price. On-farm price is what a trader or FRA will offer a farmer close to their farms. Then we have what we call into-mill price. This is the price that is offered to someone who bought from a farmer, transported that maize, incurred transport costs, and stored that maize, incurred storage costs, and if they borrowed that money to buy maize, they will also incur financial costs. Then they will sell to a miller. That is what is called into-mill price. Now, what we have noticed in the debate which has been going on, people have been mixing the two. They've been comparing on-farm price with into-mill price. Now, if you look at FRA buys maize very close to the farmer. So they are almost buying maize at on-farm price, you know, very close to the farmer. They are not buying maize in Chinika area, if in case of Lusaka. Or they are not buying maize at Antelope Milling in case of Copperbelt. Because when you go to the into-mill price, that price takes into account the cost of transporting that maize. So if you take 110, for example, on the farm, add transport costs to come to Lusaka, add storage costs, add financial costs, you find that that price may even result into 140 or 150. So we must be very careful not to compare apple and an orange, you know. We must compare what is on farm. I'll give you a living
the information
example.
that is usually given to you by ZNFU is well researched.
Yes, we are always.
So you wouldn't expect them to mix the in-farm, as you call it, on-farm.
Actually, we have actually
into meal prices.
We talked about this with them just a few weeks ago, and they really appreciated where we are coming from. You see, us as government, what we do is before we take a measure, we do a lot of research. Where FRA is buying maize, you find that the briefcase traders were buying maize at 70 kwacha, 80 kwacha. And with FRA going there at 110, FRA even at that pulling effect, and it moved the price upwards. And then if you come into urban areas, that's why you find these prices along the line of rail, which the Farmers Union was talking about. But the good thing is we are always talking with Farmers Union, and we have reconciled on this matter. So
you seem to be working against mass production of maize and suppressing the price. Last year you followed market prices. I mean, you dropped the price, and your justification was that the market price there was too much maize on the market. This year, not so much maize on the market. Demand is very high. Your price is still suppressed at 110. Would you have offered better as government to encourage crop production?
If you go in the remote areas, you'll be so shocked how the farmers are very happy. You know, and most of these farmers have been talking through their Royal Highnesses, the chiefs. They've been talking through the district commissioners. They've been talking through members of parliament in these remote areas. We are talking about remote areas here. The price there is not what has been publicized in the press. The prices in those remote areas were 78. And FRA, through government announcement of the price, has come up with a good price, which is very pleasing to the farmers in those particular areas.
Who are you serving? Just the farmers in the very remote areas?
And that's the idea, even the original purpose of Food Reserve Agency. The idea is for FRA, using government money, to buy maize in areas where the private sector can't reach. Because private sector, as you know, they are so mindful of how much profit they make. So you won't find the private sector going deep in the bush to pay a farmer a good price. They'll always be along the line of rail. So for us, through FRA, we come in to provide a market for those disadvantaged farmers, where infrastructure may be bad, communication may be bad, and that's where we are offering the 110. And farmers are very happy. If they were not happy, they wouldn't have supplied maize to the farmer. Our current worry now is actually not even the price of 110. It's the availability of cash. And as I've mentioned, we are working very well with Ministry of Finance, and we have put in mechanisms that this year, what happened last year where some farmers were not paid on time will not happen. Farmers will be paid. Even this 30,000 metric tons which I've told you, which has already been bought, ask any farmer. All farmers have been paid. There is no farmer who is complaining, and we are in control. Things are under control.
The challenges and the problem is that we've had these assurances before. Ministers, permanent secretaries, they've sat where you're sitting and have said every farmer shall be paid. But towards the end, 30 days after, the farmers don't get their money.
It is not going to happen.
And they have to protest, and it takes them 9 months to get their money.
I'm here as permanent secretary, Minister of Agriculture. Whatever I'm telling you, I have evidence of what we are doing, and I'm very confident whatever measures we put in place, they are going to happen. And I'm assuring you, and I want all the farmers to have confidence in what I'm telling them, and they must supply maize to FRA. They are going to be paid on time. I'm repeating, they will be paid on time.
You're competing with the private sector. That's a dangerous one, isn't it?
Yes, we are, but as I'm telling you, private sector are not in the remote areas. As I'm talking, if you go to the northern part of the country, I have reports as late as yesterday where I'm told some private sector have even run out of money to buy maize. In the northern part of the country. You know, so there is no real competition in the remote areas. And this is why FRA has become so important in the remote areas, because it is providing a market for these disadvantaged farmers.
Have you undertaken a post-harvest survey to ascertain the actual figures? I know you had the crop focus survey and all that, but a post-harvest survey is quite important, I think, to determine whether the 2 million you projected is actually what you have.
Thank you for that question, because it brings me back to what I was trying to explain to you in terms of what our threats are to the national food security situation. Because I alluded to the fact that we need to move into the market early, buy at least 500,000 to 600,000 metric tons under control of government. The next threat is what you have just asked me. You see, in Zambia, traditionally what we have done is we have depended on crop forecasts, which are estimates, because these estimates are done based on the area planted to maize, and also based on interviews which are done with the farmers. Now, in the past, some years back, we used to follow that one up with what we call the post-harvest survey. The post-harvest survey establishes exactly what has been harvested and exactly what is being held by millers, by private traders, and by the farmers. Now, in a year like this one, it is a must that we must do a post-harvest survey. And we have put in measures, we are working on that, so that we do a post-harvest survey for us to know exactly what we require, what we have as a country, and what position we are at. So that is in place, and we are working on that particular matter.
And when do we expect you to conclude?
The post-harvest survey is always better done in end of August, September. So that is when it will commence, because at that time, it is assumed that all the farmers have supplied the maize. The other issue which we are doing to mitigate against any threat towards this national food security is that we are contracting through the private sector early maize farmers. What I mean by early maize is that this is maize which is grown with irrigation in the months of October. That's when they plant, and they irrigate it up to the time that it meets with the rainy season. And then when we reach March, April, the maize is artificially dried and supplied on the market. So we are advanced on this one. Early maize farmers, normally these are large-scale farmers with center pivot irrigation. They are going to grow this maize. We have already reached the agreements, and this is maize which will be supplied way before the 2020 harvest.
How many tons are you targeting?
Yeah, here we are expecting to do a minimum of 120,000 metric tons. We would have done more for early maize, but you remember, we are coming from a drought situation. So most of the dams did not fill with water. Because what we have under center pivot irrigation is about 40 to 45,000 hectares. And we are hoping that we'll get farmers to at least use at least 15,000 hectares or more, between 15 and 20,000 hectares to grow the early maize, subject to the issue of load shedding and subject to availability of water in the dams. So our current assessment with Farmers Union shows that we'll easily do 120,000. And this is why I'm saying we'll do a minimum of 120,000.
Now you're talking about people illegally exporting maize. I know I may have to push you there and ask you why we're still talking illegal exports and illegal selling when we should have been capitalizing on these markets. But again, government did allow export of maize to Congo. And knowing very well we have such a situation where we're not very sure of what we have in the country.
Yeah, in terms of knowing what we have in the country, I want to mention that on a regular basis, in fact almost every 2 weeks, we have what we call a stock monitoring committee in the Ministry of Agriculture. This committee is chaired by myself in my capacity as Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, and is attended by Farmers Union, traders, millers, YAPRI, Central Statistics Office, Food Reserve Agency, and all the people involved in the maize industry. What we do is we always look at the stock in the country. We look at whether we have surplus or we have no surplus. Now, last year, when we allowed the exports of maize, it was a situation where we had a group of grain traders who had 120,000 metric tons, which they were failing to sell to the millers. And to unlock that, this is where we try to assist them so that they can export that quantity. But I'm happy to report that even if we allowed exports of maize at that particular time, 3/4, in fact more than 90% of that 120,000 was actually offloaded on the local market, because the millers became scared that they might lose that maize. And what we officially, if you go to ZRA, we were just looking at those figures about a month ago. If you go to FRA, what officially went out was not more than 14,000. Even you as ZNBC, I know you research a lot before such interviews. I'm asking you to go to FRA and check how much of maize was exported during that time. You find that it was very negligible, less than 14,000 metric tons. So in terms of monitoring, we've actually continued. In fact, now we are going to do it even at a more advanced level, because we'll be working with Smart Zambia to develop a very authentic and credible information system where real time, even on your phone, you'll be able to see what is available in the country and what surplus we have. And that will assist us a lot in making decisions as a government.
Let's look at the price of mini meal. I know it has continued to rise, with the bag of breakfast meal in some places fetching as high as 120 kwacha. And this is at a time when people are harvested already, and we should have enough maize, and we should have prices being suppressed. So what is causing this?
What is causing the high minimum prices is the high maize prices which the private sector are offering the farmers. Because as I mentioned to you earlier in this interview, I said that Zambia has just produced what we just require. So all the private sector want to secure part of that maize. And because of that, they are attracting farmers towards them by offering very high prices. Now, for them to recoup that cost, it is resulting into a high minimum price. But minimum prices, that's a matter which is under very active discussion by government. We know that food, especially minimum being a staple crop, must be affordable in the country. And the long-term solution, Grevazio, if you may allow me to divert a little bit, the long-term solution to this issue of minimum prices is for us to increase maize production in the country. If we increase maize production, minimum prices will automatically find their own equilibrium, and it will be affordable to the population. What we should be asking ourselves is, how do we increase maize production? And this is the measures which the current government is now taking, where we now want to address the issues why we have had low production. You know why we have had low production? There are several reasons. The first one, there are about 4. I hope you allow me and we'll have time to go through the 4. The first one, Grevazio, is the fact that a lot of people have gone out of maize production. The large-scale farmers were the first to leave maize production.
Because it's unprofitable.
It was unprofitable. Why was it unprofitable? It is because of what the stakeholders call unpredictable policies.
Which are currently existing.
Currently existing, and we are doing away with them. We are doing completely away. It has taken long, but it's never too late. And I want to assure the maize industry, we have had a series of meetings with them in the last 2 months, 3 months, where we have identified what is causing the problem. The first issue that the industry has complained about is the market distortions, which have been caused by untimely interventions by the Food Reserve Agency,
which you are still doing.
We are correcting that, and I want to announce to the nation through you that the Food Reserve Agency Act is actually under review, so that we address these issues of market distortions. The second thing I want to announce to you is that the Ministry of Agriculture, with support from other ministries within government, we are now looking at alternative ways of how we can cushion the minimum prices. Because the traditional way of offloading maize on the market using FRA, I heard you the other time saying it doesn't work. And it is true, it doesn't work. It just benefits the miller. Because they will get the cheap minimum price, maize from Food Reserve Agency they don't pass on that benefit to the consumer. And then even if they pass that benefit to the consumer, they are passing that benefit to urban consumers, to people who are able to afford, and not the vulnerable person. So we are trying to separate now the two. You must have heard our president, His Excellency Dr. Edgar Chagwanungu, when we attended and we were celebrating the National Harvest Day in Mumbwa, where he said he does not want his government to be associated to the rhetoric of talking about agricultural potential. He said his government wants to be associated to taking practical measures to ensure that that potential is actualized. And he has given us a directive. He doesn't want to see anything below 3.5 million tons as production in the country. So what we are doing to achieve that production, one, I've told you, we are removing these market distortions. And we have discussed with the industry, we have assured them. We are reviewing the Food Reserve Agency Act, and then we are dividing the country into those areas which are affected by drought, the southern part mostly, and the northern part which is always guaranteed of rainfall. We will push this maize production and concentrate more on the northern side. And in the southern side, we will focus on changing the mindset of farmers, not to always think that maize is the only food. They can grow cassava, they can grow sorghum, they can grow millet. They can also find early maturing varieties. They can do good agricultural practices like conservation farming and so on. Because we have had these few days. We were in Kalomo one time where we visited a farmer in Sachitema area. This farmer recorded very high yields compared to the other farmers just because of choosing the right variety, practicing conservation farming, and also others had food because they grew cassava, they grew sorghum. So maize is not just food, and this is where...
While you have maize, even last time we did mention that, while you have maize dropping, we've also had cassava production going down, sorghum, millet, they've all gone down. Basically, like we said, a sector in decline.
Yes, it has been in decline for several reasons. The other one, just to answer your question directly, because it also addresses the issues we are also talking about. The decline has been, it can be in reduction of area planted. It can also be because of productivity. You see, in Zambia, the small-scale farmers are not getting the correct yield per hectare. You know, if you go to Mumba, where we were celebrating the National Harvest Day, this was a farmer who produces minimum 10 tons per hectare, and on average, 14 tons per hectare, compared to farmers who are producing 1.29 hectares, you know. And then if you look at farmers who are practicing conservation farming, this is where you do minimum tillage. You know, normally you just reap to allow water to come in and so on. Those farmers, on average, small-scale farmers, who are being promoted by conservation farming units, they are producing a minimum of 4 tons per hectare. So productivity is an issue, and this is what we want to address as a ministry. So that if we look at the area that we plant to maize, 1.5 million hectares, imagine if we just increased by 1 hectare, by 1 ton in terms of yield, we'll have an extra 1.5 million, which is almost what we require as a country. So
now, back to maize and mini meal. It looks for now that Zambians have to prepare for a high price of mini meal. The prices keep going up. Are there any interventions that may either keep the price where they are or reduce them? But it looks they would not reduce anytime soon. So Zambians should be ready to pay for highly for mini meal?
Here, I'll be very honest with you. This year is unique compared to other years. Prices of maize, they've manifested themselves already. They are high and they are escalating. And that, of course, will translate to higher minimum prices than normal. This is expected for most parts of this particular year. But in terms of the interventions that government is going to make, we are currently busy working on this particular matter. And at an appropriate time, we'll make the announcement.
What you've been doing now is subsidizing them, the millers, and giving them cheap maize from FRA. can this be done forever? This is unsustainable.
No,
isn't it?
it's very
it can't go on.
unsustainable.
I mean,
I agree with you, Grevazio. It can't go on. And as I've
Are you able to
mentioned,
sustain this project until next year, 2020?
in fact, first of all, Food Reserve Agency, looking at the quantities of maize that they normally hold, those quantities are not enough to bring prices down. They are not enough. Because what we consume as a country is about is between 1.8 to 1.9 million tons. I'm talking about the industrial consumption. This is mini-meal and the other industrial use like stock feed manufacturing, brewing, and so on. It's about 1.8 to 1.9 million. Now, to suppress those prices, it means FRA must also stock almost that quantity so that you supply to every miller, to every brewer, to every stock feed manufacturer for you to see prices going down. So just from that point of angle, it is not a sustainable way. Secondly, the millers, for so many years that we have done this particular thing, they've never reduced prices. You know, they've actually just benefited their own profit, and they've not passed it to the consumer. So it's not sustainable. I agree with you.
So why are you still giving them subsidized maize?
No.
It's a wrong intervention.
I'm telling you, we are stopping that. Because, you know, some of the millers have actually made Food Reserve Agency as if it is their trading or marketing wing. We know millers, I can't mention names here, who their friends are busy buying now from the farmers. But them, they are just sitting, knowing that at an appropriate time, they'll just phone and buy from FRA. So I want to tell the millers that they must invest in getting maize from the farmers.
But
the
you
only
can
millers,
run the millers as you sit there, but you do not have the muscle, do you?
No.
Millers will twist you using the public. They will increase the price.
Yes,
and you'll be panicking as PS at agriculture.
Yes, but if they twist us and increase the prices, and we rush to Food Reserve Agency, we are just agreeing here that Food Reserve Agency intervention doesn't reduce prices. So we are better off as government being much more clever this time and looking at other ways of how we can reduce or cushion the minimum prices for the vulnerable. And as I've mentioned, this matter is under very active discussion within government, and we'll soon be coming up with measures which are more effective, you know. Because, you know, when government intervenes, first and foremost, government is intervening for the vulnerable person, the one who cannot afford to buy minimal, the one who cannot afford higher prices. So we are currently very active to ensure that we do that. But in the long term, I'm telling you, this issue of FRA, minimum prices, shortfalls, and what, they are going to be a thing of the past, because we have agreed with the private sector on what we shall do to increase maize production. Already, we have agreed with them, we have to double the current maize production, because we need to take care of the export market. You know, Grevazio, maize, if you look at maize, I don't know why we have all these politics about maize. I personally...
They're probably all created by governments.
Probably, and also the politics. Because if you look at maize, maize is something that you and me can easily grow. Maize is something that can grow almost everywhere in Zambia. Zambia is a country which has vast land, good climate. And on top of that, Zambia's market for the maize is not only the local market. We have a huge market in Congo DRC. We just had a meeting with the governor of Katanga in July in Ndola. They need 1.3 million tons of maize and mini-meal from Zambia. Namibia wants Zambia to grow for them. We can export to Burundi, Rwanda. So we can export to Botswana.
But when people grow, you come in as government.
And this is where I'm saying
stop them from exporting.
We are going
to calling them smugglers and illegal traders.
That must stop. You know, I mean,
you give them all sorts of names, and
doesn't motivate farming. It has been a wrong approach. You know, the approach we have had in the past, which we are changing, and the president has repeatedly mentioned this. First of all, let's make maize profitable. Let's give the farmer a price that they deserve. Give the farm, and this is why you saw even the FRA price. Last year we were at 70 kwacha. A jump from 70, which is almost double to 110, already demonstrates what government is trying to do. Then we are going to give the farmer what they want, and then we are going to separate, because what we have done is we have mixed subsidizing of mini meal prices and what the farmer should get. You know, I've heard people, and I've laughed, because they were saying, some of the people have said, why has FRA increased from 70 to 110? What is going to happen to the mini meal prices? You know, what we are supposed to be saying is, what is the correct price for the farmer? So that the farmer is every year encouraged to grow maize. Then if we give the farmer the right price, what will be the resultant mini meal price? Now that the mini meal prices are at this level, what do we do to intervene to cushion for the vulnerable? That's how we are supposed to be. Not by, you start from mini meal price, what should be the mini meal price? Then you start squeezing, going to the farmer.
And the miller at the end of the day comes out as a bigger beneficiary.
Yes. But things are changing, Grevazo, and I'm telling you, from next year, next planting season, we must take advantage of the export markets. We must give the farmer what they require. If minimum prices are higher, we must have an alternative way of cushioning those minimum prices without affecting the value chain of maize. It's the only way we are going to increase maize in Zambia. If we do it any other way, starting with minimum going down, then it's ourselves to blame. It's ourselves to blame.
You'll have done it.
Look at the roads.
But we've been doing it all the time. All the time. We've been in the same.
I think there's a general realization.
And things will change.
And I'm very happy there's a political will and the interventions on how we intervene on mini-meal, those are going to be separated on how we treat the maize industry. Otherwise, how are we going to increase maize production? If we keep stifling,
if you kill the farmer.
This is
let's look at another issue, very important. Farmer Input Support Program, e-voucher. There's talk that you're scrapping off e-voucher. Is that what is the position now?
Yeah, I've also seen that in the newspapers. And I want to encourage stakeholders in the agricultural industry that if there's any issue that they want to seek clarification, our doors are open. You see, our ministry, we have an open door policy, right from my minister, Honorable Michael Katambo, through my office and to all the officers. Our policy now is open door policy. Any clarification, they must come to us. With regard to Farmer Input Support Program, government's policy is to promote e-voucher for one simple reason. E-voucher is cheap, and e-voucher promotes competition amongst seed suppliers, amongst fertilizer suppliers, and amongst other input suppliers. E-voucher also gives the farmer a wide choice, you know, of what they want to buy. The challenge which has been there, which I now want to clarify, which most people have not understood very clearly, is that e-voucher, because, you know, some people just talk e-voucher, e-voucher. They don't even know how e-voucher works. So if you may allow me to just explain in very simple terms. You see, e-voucher is about a farmer. Originally, a farmer used to have like a Visa card, the ones we have from the banks. You go to an ATM, you punch in, money comes out because you have money on the card. Or you go to ShopRite, you swipe, because there's money in there, ShopRite gives you the goods.
Yes.
If there's no money in that card, ShopRite will not give you the goods. Now, this is how we started with e-voucher, where the farmers had these cards. Then government will load those cards with money. So they'll go to a registered agro dealer, they will swipe, the agro dealer will see money in his account, and then he will give the farmer the input. Now, last year, what happened is, we went what we call the cardless system, where the cards were no longer in use. The farmer will go to an agro dealer, they transact, and then what the agro dealer was getting was a paper value. You know, a paper value, not money. Paper value. Then he will give this farmer the inputs. Then based on that paper value, the agro dealer invoices
government,
Ministry of Government, invoices government, and then government pays the agro dealer. Now what happened last year, because of this challenge I'm talking about, that e-voucher requires huge amounts of money upfront. You have to fund it upfront, so that when the agro dealer and the farmer transact, the agro dealer must immediately have the money. Now last year we had this challenge, and this is why agro dealers, you've heard them cry, about
so you're
arrears.
owing agro dealers. How
We
much are you owing
owing
them?
I'm happy to report that some 2-3 months ago, we were owing agro dealers more than 600 million kwacha. We have been dismantling on a very fast rate, and now we are just owing them just over 300 million, and we are hoping that by the end of, before the planting season, all agro dealers are going to be paid.
That is 3 months' time. Is it 2 months' time?
Yeah, about 2 months or so. They should be paid.
You're confident you managed to dismantle
because
300
Ministry of
million.
Finance is now, at least on a regular basis, they are releasing some money.
So what's the position on IVACHA? Are you suspending it because you
We
do not
are
have
not
upfront
coming
money?
back to IVACHA. We are not suspending IVACHA. We are going to run both programs simultaneously. Direct input supply, where we hire national suppliers and they position the inputs close to the farmers. And then we're also going to run the IVACHA. So, to state it categorically, we have not abandoned IVACHA. What we have done is we are going to stabilize IVACHA at a level where we can sustainably maintain it with upfront funding. And even coming next year, I can assure you that those things of arrears and what are not going to be there, because we have put things in place. For example, Minister of Finance, I just got a letter some 2 weeks ago. Because 2 months ago, we asked Minister of Finance that the monies, the 400 kwachas which farmers contribute, instead of them taking it to government through the famous Control 99, you know it, the money there may get swallowed. We wrote to them 2-3 months ago to say, look, why don't you allow us as a ministry to retain this money? So that when we start the IVACHA, the money will be already available to pay upfront. For
the dealers can be assured that you pay
very
upfront.
assured, because
they'll have money.
The Secretary to Treasury, Minister of Finance, just wrote me a letter 2 weeks ago accepting our proposal, and all the money that is being contributed will now remain at Ministry of Agriculture, and that's the one we'll use for the initial part to pay for this transaction. So I can assure them that those problems of the past will not be there.
So initially, IVACHA was supposed to create a situation of diversification where people can get any other thing other than maize and fertilizer.
Correct.
It hasn't achieved that purpose, has it?
Yes, and this is why I'm using the word stabilization. You know, we didn't stabilize the program at a certain level. As it matures, you keep increasing. As it matures, you keep increasing. So what we have done as a government is that we have decided to stabilize it at a certain level. And then,
when you say stabilized, taking a small amount, small number of people?
Not very small. It's quite sizable. Because,
how many districts are we looking at?
40 districts are going to be under IVACHA. And these districts were chosen using 2 criteria. One is our ability to have money upfront to avoid these areas. Number 2 is based on the fact that those farmers in areas which are normally affected by dry spells, we need to practice what we call climate smart agriculture. They need a wide choice. You know, we can't force fertilizer on them. We can't force long maturing varieties on them. You know, they need a wide choice to get early maturing varieties, drought resilient crops, to do livestock if they want to do goats if they want to. So all those areas which were normally affected by dry spells, those are going to be under IVACHA. And then those areas where we are very sure that it is always raining, come what may, those are the ones which are on direct input supply.
So in terms of IVACHA, it's probably 20 steps ahead and maybe 40 backwards. We are taking so many districts and suddenly cut them off.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that, you see, as you are moving with any system, even you here at ZNBC, if you are moving with a certain program, like one time you were doing those, is it digitization or whatever, as you go along, when you hit a header, a good planner, a good project manager will stop, analyze that header. Once you sort it out, you move. You hit another header, you move, just until you reach. And this is why I'm saying we are now going to stabilize.
And then start
at a certain
increasing.
level, perfect it. As we perfect it, we'll keep increasing slowly, not the way we did in... there was one time, can you imagine? We tried it in Kabwe. And it worked very well in Kabwe. Now, just Ikabwe alone, from there we said, let's do it in 13 districts. Then from about 13 districts or so, we said the whole country at a go. Yeah? This
and
is
you
where...
you were adamant then. ZNBC told you 13 was not a good sample. You were adamant as government. I know you were not PS then.
Yes, I was not, but I've always been in this sector. I understand this. Yes.
Government was adamant.
I understand it. But we've now agreed. In fact, if you talk to Zambia National Farmers themselves, they agree a lot with what we have done so far. That let's be at a level where we have enough money up front, and then as we perfect it, let's start increasing slowly, until maybe 2-3 years down the line, we'll be 100% e-voucher.
Yes. As we close, I know we're running out of time. This question I needed to ask you. FISIP has been almost restricted to maize by the standards and looking at the figures. Are there any plans to move it away from there? Probably even take it to livestock. Other countries have moved with livestock and for poor families, and it's worked well. Rwanda is an example.
Yes, I agree with you, Grevazio. And in fact, not only moving into livestock, but also moving into machinery, because small-scale farmers need mechanization, for them to increase the yield per hectare. And that's exactly what e-voucher tries to achieve. Because under e-voucher, a farmer is free to get any input. They
but
can
not
go
free to move to life.
They do.
They can get animals. Out
yes,
of,
they even get drugs. They use the e-voucher.
Restricted to drugs or to animals?
No, it's everything. Under e-voucher, it's anything that a farmer wants. That's the beauty about e-voucher. And that's why it is important to perfect it. And if you want to perfect something, start at a manageable level, the way we have now done. And then, as we perfect it, we'll be moving slowly. Whether it takes us 2 years, 3 years or so, but we have to be perfecting. When we take a further step, we must be very sure there will not be any of these hurdles and whatever. The way we moved 100%, then suddenly there was no money to fund the
sustain your ambitions.
Yeah, so we are now very careful.
Under a minute, diversification. I know you were in Livingston, and there was serious talk that we've spoken too much on diversification and we're failing. Under a minute, what is your plan?
You see, the plan on diversification is to address the issues which affect the farmers, which affect the traders, which affect the millers, or other agro-processors. The issues I mentioned about maize, where government interferes, it still applies to other crops. If we address that issue, farmers will grow. If we open up the markets, the export markets, we avoid these closing and off of export bans and so on, we will achieve diversification. You see, the problem is a farmer has always been looked at as if they don't think. No. A farmer thinks. A farmer will respond where the price is good and is making a profit. You can go there with any crop. As long as the farmer sees, oh yeah, I'm able to sell this, I'm able to make a profit, farmers will go there. So what is important is for government to create an environment where the private sector are very confident, where the farmers know they'll get a good return and make a profit. And this is the first thing we must address, the policy environment. And what I'm telling you about what we are trying to do with maize applies to all the other crops. And you will see, the way we are going to open the export markets, the way we are structuring these export markets with countries together with the private sector. If you saw, when we went to Ndola to meet the governor of Katanga, we were not just government. We were there as Minister of Agriculture, together with Minister of Commerce. The meeting was arranged by our colleagues from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I went with traders. I went with farmers. I went with farmers, I went with traders. And whatever we were talking as government was the input we were getting from the traders and the farmers. Because if we do things together with the private sector, we are going to achieve. And this is why this year we are coming up with a covenant with the private sector. We will agree on do's and don'ts, because we want to get the large-scale farmers back into maize. We want to get all those small-scale farmers who left maize back into maize, and we want to just be a heavy...
Are you not supposed to be getting out of maize?
No, not out of maize. Because why should we be...
them to diversify?
Why should we be out of maize when we have all this market around?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Grevazo, and thank you for everything. Thank you very much.
You've been watching Sunday Interview, and our guest this evening was the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Songowayo Zyambo. I'll be back next week sometime. Pleasant viewing.